Eagle fans. I have got a very special feature for you today. After the sad loss of 2 eaglets at the Redding, California nest this year, 2024, it got me to thinking whether conditions were similar to when an eaglet in the same nest was lost in 2017. The eaglet that year, 2017, was confirmed by necropsy to have died by heat and dehydration. So I set out to compare conditions from the 2 years and find out what I could learn from that. What followed for me was an educational journey into the topics of heat and dehydration. And what I learned impressed me as to what eagles go through. Thus, our title graphic, Eaglets at Risk, A Race to Survive. In my research, I found out so much that was new to me that I think there will be a fair amount that's new to you too. I made all new custom graphics and combined them with AI illustrations to help you envision these concepts more clearly and in a new way. I'm so happy to have you along as we take a look at the science behind an eaglet's fight to survive. So here's where we're going on today's journey. We're going to explore the biology of hydration and dehydration. We'll delve into 2 test cases of bald eaglets in extreme heat, those from 2017 and 2024. We'll draw our conclusions. We'll look at ways you can help. A couple of viewing notes for you. This video was set up in 4K. So check your settings for the best resolution. There is text and graphics throughout. If you're viewing on a smaller device, you might want to zoom in. Regardless, I will talk you through the main points of each graphic. Between the graphics, the text, and my explanations, I'm sure that I've got you covered. So there will be no reason to look like a confused Nicolas Cage impersonator. I think you'll be pleased to find out how much we learned together. So here we go. Quite simply, proper hydration is a balance. Proper hydration is taking in enough fluids to counteract all of the internal and external processes that are taking it away. An eagle requires proper hydration in order to maintain healthy organ functions, biological processes, including, which is important for our topic, thermoregulation, which is the maintenance of proper body temperature. Of course, the other side of that scale is dehydration, an imbalance. Dehydration produces unhealthy organ functions, biological processes, and a decreasing ability to thermoregulate. There are a myriad of factors which can cause dehydration. Chiefly among those is extreme heat, and can also be added to an inadequate food supply and lack of access to sufficient drinking water. Of course, for an eaglet or any nestling, there is no access to drinking water, so 100% of its internal fluids must come from its food source. And while an eagle can absorb water through its skin from rain or wading in a water source, that moisture is generally only beneficial for its skin health and evaporative cooling, and not for internal processes such as organ function and biological processes. I like what our friend Marilee Woodhouse had to say about this. She told me dehydration is an effect, but the initial cause is high heat and or becoming too weakened to eat for that and additional reasons. Marilee is a raptor rescuer and rehabber with Defiance Canyon Raptor Rescue, so she has a lot of experience with this. So let's take a look at the way an eagle and an eaglet try to tip the scale of hydration in their favor. An adult eagle gets its water from a couple of sources. Number one is the water content of its food, and we'll discuss that more later, and also from drinking directly from water sources. Anyone who thinks that eagles don't drink can see it happen right here. This illustration oversimplifies the concept, but for a young bald eaglet in the nest, if you are a foot above water, you might as well be 100 miles. So like the young of many species, eaglets have a near 100% dependence on adults bringing in enough food to also meet their water intake needs. So what is the water content of food that eagles eat? Here's a list of a few sources. The freshwater fish clock in at the highest, which is 70 to 80% of their body weight is water. Coots are about 70%, squirrels 50 to 60. Carrion, which is dead wildlife, can be as dry as 0 up to 65% if fresh. As a comparison, humans have about 55 to 60% water content, so we rank in there with the squirrels. So here's one of those graphics that I warned you about. Way too much text and way too small to read. So let me guide you through it. One of the main questions that we need to know the answer is, how much water does an eagle need per day? Simply using round numbers, it needs about 10% of its body weight in fluid per day. So for a 10-pound eagle, it needs about 1 pound of water per day, which would be 16 fluid ounces of water. It needs much more than that in hot weather to combat dehydration. While an adult eagle can supplement its food sources of water by drinking, an eaglet confined to the nest cannot. So how much food equates to 16 fluid ounces of water? If we actually had an eaglet that weighed 10 pounds, say it could get close to that by the time it's ready to fledge at, say, 11 or 12 weeks, it might need 16 fluid ounces of water. If a nearly full-grown eaglet requires 16 fluid ounces of water, we take that 16 fluid ounces and consider the water content of its food at 65 to 80%, and that equates to a need for about 20 to 24 ounces of food per day, much more if it's hot. So what does this curve mean? Well, a sigmoid curve, the S-shaped curve here, and these are non-specific quantities that just show a relationship between the increased eaglet weight, the black line from hatchling to fledgling there, and the relationship they have to the amount of food and water they need. The blue line is increased food and water needs from growth only. But we see that the red line is growth plus fluid loss from heat and dehydration. So the bottom line is the kids are growing. A partial fish stick is not enough anymore. They need at least one full trout, if not more, and more if it's hot. So after I put this graphic together, I suddenly realized that there is a danger zone for the nestlings, that being the eaglets, toward the end of their growth cycle. This is represented by the yellow box, and let me explain what that means. So an eaglet about to fledge is taking in just about as much food, and thereby its water, as an adult would, which places a lot of stress on the adults to provide enough food, and that being compounded by the number of eaglets in the nest. The way the nesting season works for the bald eagle here, at least in mid and southern latitudes, it's going to be the warmest and the greatest potential for having a heat wave towards the time when it fledges. So that potential alone, besides just meeting enough food and water intake through that food for growing, if there's a heat wave, it multiplies that food and hunting supply demand even more. Therefore, in the last few weeks before an eaglet fledges is the greatest danger for extreme heat, inadequate food supply, and dehydration. Okay, so I'm going to ring the bell to get your attention, and I'm going to ask you to put your thinking caps on, because this next point is very important to what we're talking about, and I think you'll be able to use it for the rest of the years that you watch eagles. Okay, so the important topic is called the thermal neutral zone, or the TNZ for short. Don't you dare lose focus, because this is way too important, and it's easier than you think it is. Think of it like the story with the three bears. For the eagles, some air temperatures are too cold, some are just right, and some are too hot. For a bald eagle, the just right temperatures are from 23 Fahrenheit up to 77 degrees Fahrenheit. That's represented by the green zone. Below 23 Fahrenheit, it's a little bit too cold for the eagles, and above 77, it gets too hot. But you say, wait, I see eagles in places where it's cold and it's hot. So yes, eagles do live in places where it gets hotter and warmer than the thermal neutral zone. It simply requires that the eagles spend more energy to do so. The term thermal neutral refers to the thermal neutral zone, TNZ, which is the range of ambient temperatures at which a bald eagle can maintain its body temperature without expending extra energy. Therefore, it's a relationship between temperature and the amount of energy that an eagle has to use to thermoregulate. There's a lot of text here, and if you want to do a deep dive, you can read that. I am going to walk you through a simple explanation here. Like other animals, the eagle regulates its body temperature no matter what the ambient temperature is around it. That includes above, below, and within the thermal neutral zone. Within the green area, the eagle does not have to expend more than its normal energy in order to thermoregulate. However, above and below, the more extreme the temperature, the more energy the eagle has to use in order to thermoregulate. If you're wondering about the human thermal neutral zone, for us, lightly clothed to, let's say, barely clothed, that would range from about 58 Fahrenheit up to 90 Fahrenheit. This is not an exhaustive list, but here are 4 weather forces of dehydration: temperature, humidity, solar radiation, and the duration of a heat wave. Temperature, of course, we just went through the thermal neutral zone. If it's too high, it requires more food and water for the eagle to thermoregulate and also to operate its bodily functions. Humidity, very high or very low, can hinder the process of an eagle thermoregulating. Solar radiation adds to the heat, and the duration of the heat wave, it has to do with a factor whether the eagle is able to recover from day to day from its dehydration. Solar radiation is an extremely important factor in dehydration. During the day, all the importance in the world can be stressed between a nest that has shade and one that does not. Nests in the shade and direct sunlight are essentially the same air temperature, but nestlings in the direct sunlight are additionally heated by the UV radiation from the sun. According to one study, the difference for eaglets being in a nest that's in the shade or direct sunlight can make as much as 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit difference between the eaglets in the two conditions. A 2.7 degree Fahrenheit increase in body temperature might not seem like much, but think about what it does to you. An adult bald eagle's body temperature is around 106 Fahrenheit, and eaglets are a couple degrees below that. When temperatures are mild and food is plentiful, we generally don't observe that dehydration has an effect on the eaglet, even if it's in the sun. However, as soon as the air temperatures rise with a heat wave, or if food supply is inadequate, that's when we begin to see dehydration. All other factors being equal, this factor alone might make the difference between an eagle living or not. Let's look at another factor called a negative feedback loop. We'll be just looking at the large text in this circle on the left. So, what are the causes? The initial cause is a heat wave, and another cause would be, in the center there, insufficient food and water to deal with the heat wave. So what happens when we have those two causes? We follow the red arrows to the right. When that happens, energy needs increase for cooling processes. That's an effect. Then food and water needs increase. That's an effect. And then there is worsening of dehydration, weakness, organ damage, and decreased interest in food. That also is an effect. Now, if we keep going around the circle, if that heat wave continues, which is its duration, that cycle daily produces conditions that are worse and worse for the eagle. So we looked at forces that produce dehydration. Now let's look at the tools that the eagle and the eaglet have to fight dehydration. These are thermoregulation, food, water, shade, and recovery. Thermoregulation deals with the temperature itself and helps the eagle to cool itself through several processes, but that requires energy. So another force for fighting dehydration is food. So it gets new nutrition for increased energy, and also through that food, water to help with thermoregulation and biological processes. That water from the food is used in all sorts of bodily processes to help the eagle thermoregulate. Shade, we just talked about avoiding solar radiation. So if there's shade, that's also a weapon. And finally, recovery. If the eagle has a chance to recover its hydration through a break in a heat wave, that also makes a huge difference. So when you add all these forces up, you have an epic battle in nature. You have all of these weather factors working against the eagle, and the eagle has the factors that it uses to cope. And we all hope that the eagle wins. On the right side of this graphic is a list of debilitating and fatal effects of dehydration, and we'll go through those. On the left side is bird anatomy, and this is from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. It allows us to visualize the different parts of the bird as we go through this list. If you want to do a deeper dive, you can read the text, but I'm just going to do a quick overview of each. The debilitating and potentially fatal effects of dehydration include organ damage, such as the kidneys, liver, and heart. It also includes muscular issues, such as weakness and fatigue. It can affect respiratory system, when dehydration thickens respiratory secretions and breathing becomes difficult. Dehydration can have major impacts on the digestive and waste systems. These include constipation, impaction, reduced excretions, reduced digestive efficiency, increased uric acid, and electrolyte imbalance. Dehydration can produce circulatory issues from a reduction in blood volume. It can also cause neurological problems, metabolic imbalance, and emaciation. A weakened and sickly bird with organs not functioning properly may actually start to turn away from food instead of taking it in. Here's another point where the rubber hits the road. How much dehydration is too much, and what kind of temperatures can affect a bird, and by how much. You'll see the range on this chart: mild dehydration at 5 to 7% body weight loss, moderate at 8 to 10%, severe dehydration at 11 to 13% body weight loss, and critical dehydration at 14 to 15% body weight loss. You can read the different effects at different levels of dehydration, but the critical dehydration at 14 to 15% body weight loss, it says it can be lethal, leading to organ failure, coma, and eventually death. I found one of those statistics that you find hard to believe. And what I found was this. 5 different sources cited that extreme high temperatures, that in quotes, and one of those sources cited at and above 104 degrees Fahrenheit. They say a bird can lose as much as 5% of its body weight in water per hour. If that's true, it's incredible. It would mean that a bird could become severely to critically dehydrated in one day if temperatures exceed, say, around 104 degrees Fahrenheit. That would be if the bird is not getting an increase in its food supply and thereby water supply, So if there is an abundant food supply for an eaglet, this is one of the ways it could counteract a high temperature. So the danger is heat and dehydration, and the mitigation of danger is increased food supply and hopefully a quick fledge. So now we finally get to our test cases to see what the data shows. How hot is too hot, and how long is too long to endure? These are the eaglets Sol and Luna from the Redding, California nest in 2024. Sadly, they died at 11 to 12 weeks old, right at the time when they were ready to fledge. Though it's the same tree and same nest between 2017 and 2024, you can see that Sol and Luna have very little shade. Same nest, different year. This is Solo from 2017. You see here there's some sun in the nest, but there you can also see that there is shade in the nest at other times. This is 2017 video of Marilee Woodhouse from the Defiance Canyon Raptor Rescue attending to Solo. Sadly, Solo died here just a few hours after this video was taken. The official cause was heat stress and dehydration. The location of our test cases from 2017 and 2024 is from Redding, California. You can see it's a mid-latitude city in Northern California. Despite its mid-latitude location, Redding gets an average of 30 to 40 days per summer over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And in 2017, that number was 72 days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The record temperature in 2024, they just broke their old mark of 118. The new mark here in July 2024 is now 120 degrees Fahrenheit. The city has mixed-use residential and commercial properties. There is substantial riparian habitat along the Sacramento River. So this was step one in my investigation of the eaglet deaths from 2017 and 2024. And as a side note, I want to clarify that in 2017, the eaglet was named Solo, S-O-L-O, and in 2024, there was an eaglet named Luna and one named Sol, S-O-L. So hopefully I won't get those names crossed up, though they're similar. So I looked up the temperatures from 2017 and 2024 for a span of 105 days before the deaths of the eaglets. That covered a period all the way back to prior to when the eaglets in each of the years hatched. Let me show you how that worked. So I took that curvy temperature line and I overlaid my color scheme for the eagle thermal neutral zone. And the blue indicates below the thermal neutral zone at 23 degrees, and all of the warm colors above the green represent up above the thermal neutral zone above 77 Fahrenheit. The color choices are arbitrary and are by me. The green rectangle represents when the eaglets at this nest typically hatch. Now, in this particular year, 2017, there was a second clutch. And about a month late, Solo hatched where the red rectangle is, just to the right of the green. As Solo grew in the days going from the right of the hatch, you'll see that the temperatures start to get some days above the thermal neutral zone. Those are heat waves. Now, early on, Solo was smaller, and the food demand, and thus the water demand, was lower and easier for the adults to meet. As Solo got bigger, that food and water demand increased. The green rectangle on the right is when the eaglets from this nest normally fledge. But because Solo was from a second clutch, he was going to fledge later. And unfortunately for Solo, there was a record heat wave. That heat wave is represented by the red rectangle on the right. Now, I realize this is a scale of the entire nesting season from hatch to fledge, but we will zoom in on the heat wave and take a very close look at that. Sadly, in the end, Solo died the day after that 114 degree temperature that you see within the red rectangle. This is the same type of graph, but this one was generated for the 2024 Eaglets, Luna, and Sol. You'll see where they hatched in the red rectangle to the left, and you'll see where there was a heat wave in that rectangle to the right, the one in the middle. And unfortunately, both of the eaglets died during that heat wave. And the subsequent heat wave to the right was after the deaths of the eaglets. This is a zoomed in graph of the heat waves during 2017 and 2024. The 2017 line is the black one. That's for the eaglet named Solo. And the 2024 line is blue for Sol and Luna. You'll see there that Luna fledged on June 11th. During a 107 degree day. Later on that blue line, the eaglet Sol died 3 days later on 6/14. Luna was last seen on 6/16, and her body was found on 6/18. The eaglet Solo from 2017, it shows that he died on June 25th of that year after a 114 degree day. You might be wondering what happened to the squiggly temperature lines. And on this graph, it just shows the maximum daily temperature instead of the hourly temperature all throughout the day. Later on, I will add that squiggly line back so we can see exactly what happened. I initially aligned the data on this graph so that Solo's death in 2017 fell between the deaths of Luna and Sol from 2024. I reevaluated the data and found a better alignment. On this graph, I moved the black line backwards by 2 days, and you'll see the red circle there on the left. So the reason I moved it back 2 days is that I found that the date or the actual day that the temperatures entered into that orange or red zone coincided, so it was going to be easier to tell if heat was a factor in both of these years. Just as a note, the alignment of this data will be used on the graphs which are upcoming, but I will be dropping the dates for clarity to clean up the graph. Lots of text, graphs, and all kinds of other things on this chart, but let me tell you why. This is where the rubber meets the road. Those of you who are going to do a deep dive are going to want to know the footnotes. Which of this is a hypothesis of mine, which will need further study and further data to prove anything, and which of it is scientific fact. I hope that I've covered that through all of these notes. Let's go over the scientific facts first from the center of the graph. This graph is only for Solo's battle with heat from 2017. If you look at the graph, and again, the black wavy lines are the hourly temperatures and the straight lines at the top connect the maximum temperatures, you'll see just how much time that Solo spent above the thermoneutral zone in that year. Even at night, the low temperatures barely dropped into the thermoneutral zone, and on some nights they didn't get there at all. So in 2017, Solo spent 7 consecutive days where high temperatures ranged from 107 to 114. There were 8 consecutive days of little or no time in the thermoneutral zone. Some mitigating factors that might have contributed to Solo's longevity for as long as he did might have included some limited shade and an ample food supply, since Solo was the only eaglet that year. A 2017 necropsy performed on Solo determined that he died of heat stress and dehydration. This graph is similar to the previous, but this one outlines Luna and Sol's battle with heat and dehydration in 2024. Again, you can see just how much time the birds spent above the thermoneutral zone, and though this heat wave was a little less severe than the one Solo went through in 2017, you'll see that on 3 occasions it reached 107, and there were many days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So Sol and Luna's battle with heat and dehydration in 2024 included 11 consecutive days with maximum temperatures more than 95 degrees, including 6 from 103 to 107. They had limited time in the thermoneutral zone each day. Contributing factor includes limited shade, which means that there was a lot of solar radiation here. Other factors under investigation: a necropsy and confirmed cause of death is pending for Luna if it can be performed by Fish and Wildlife. This graph presents a summary of everything. It compares the heat waves from 2017 and 2024. And you see that there are similarities, but the heat wave from 2017 was quite a bit hotter. I presented my hypothesis over to the right side of the red and purple tinted areas, that I believed that temperatures from 95 to 100 can potentially cause severe dehydration for an exposure of multiple hours per day and multiple days. I believe that the dehydration can be potentially critical from 100 to 105 for that same type of exposure. And above 105, I believe, is potentially and probably fatal if the heat wave persists for more than a couple of days. Again, my data won't prove out my hypothesis to be a theory, and there may never be enough data to prove or disprove this. Of course, most eaglets survive heat waves, but that means that their food and fluid demands are being met and they are being kept healthy in order to fight the heat wave. Take this data for what you will, but I believe there is a use for it. If you're watching a nest and you're tracking the temperatures, start taking note when it's above the thermal neutral zone, but that's not necessarily a time to have concern. When the birds are ready to fledge and they're full size and there's a lot of food demand in order to meet the fluid needs, that's when it gets to be in the danger zone when there's a heat wave, because that food demand really increases. And if it's not met, the bird enters that negative feedback cycle. Here is a summary chart comparing 2017 and 2024. So if you want to pause and do a deep dive, then please do. I did receive a summary of the findings in Solo's Necropsy from 2017, but I reformatted it in a report format like this. The cause of death is listed as heat stress and severe dehydration. A necropsy is still pending for Luna from the 2024 incident, and we will report on that if and when we get that back. Hindsight's 2020, but we can always look back and add our education now to help know what we can do in the future. First, let's take a look at what signs that dehydration can present in an eagle that we're viewing. Again, this is not an exhaustive list, but dehydration can be seen in lethargy, a lack of energy, panting, just a lot of thermoregulation going on, changes in droppings, which can include constipation or impaction, weight loss, prolonged wing spreading and drooping. Those can be signs of advanced thermoregulation needs and muscle weakness. Ataxia, which is a loss of coordination and balance, loss of appetite, and cerebral edema, which is brain swelling, which we can't see without a necropsy, but we can see things like tremors, seizures, and the other symptoms listed above. We saw prolonged wing spreading and drooping for both birds in the nest in 2024, but Sol had it much worse. For him, there was a lack of appetite, even though there was food in the nest. There was ataxia, which is loss of coordination. There was difficulty in respiration. And finally, poor Sol was overwhelmed. We'll find out, I hope, the actual cause of death, but I have to believe that heat was at least a contributing cause here, sadly. Could anything have been done to help Sol? I don't think so. I'm told that even if we had known the extent of trouble that Sol was in, that Fish and Wildlife would have had to approve a rescue in the nest, which they rarely do. Additionally, access to this nest is hazardous now that the tree is dead and the branches are cracked. So it's highly unlikely that a rescue in the nest would have ever happened. As far as Luna goes, she fledged about 3 days before Sol died. And the ground crew saw her on the ground. They saw her walking normally. They saw her drinking water. And by all observances, Luna appeared no different than any of the other fledglings who had been in that area in prior years. Guardian and Liberty, the adults, were seen in the area, and though a food delivery was not witnessed, both of these adult eagles are very experienced, and there is no reason to believe that they didn't bring food to Luna. So again, there were absolutely no signs that Luna was in any trouble based on all the observations of people who have decades of eagle observations. It was a few days after that when Luna went missing, and a few days even after that when the ground crew found out that Luna had not survived. I just don't think that we can go down that road to find blame or responsibility for somebody in this. I think we can take our new education and watch ever vigilantly and do whatever we can, which is the section that we will cover last here. So how can you help? Specifically you. If you happen to see a raptor, say an eagle, whether it's something that you're observing directly or on a webcam, I talked to Marilee Woodhouse from the Defiance Canyon Raptor Rescue and asked her about this question. She recommended that you call a Raptor Rescue and Rehabilitation Center for help. She recommends that you stay with the bird until an experienced and permitted rescuer arrives. She recommends that you avoid picking up the bird if possible. She says it can be dangerous. I asked her if people should call government agencies. She said that you certainly can, but that typically those governmental agencies refer callers to a rehabber. Marilee was relating to me that most raptor rescue and rehab centers rely on donations. Centers like hers, they don't get money from big sources, and they absolutely rely upon you and me. I can tell you that Redding just had a major heat wave, and we're still in the middle of it, with a new all-time high of 120 degrees this past Saturday. Marilee is very active in rescuing birds, including bald eaglets, and the need is great now and in the future too. Marilee gave me this map that shows locations where her organization has rescued bald eagles and golden eagles, and their information you'll find in the box to the bottom right there. I don't ask you folks for money. I don't monetize my channel, so I'm trying not to put ads in your way. So if I can ask you anything, I would ask that you consider, if you're able, to donate to Defiance Canyon Raptor Rescue. They operate under the organization called Battle Creek Alliance, and you'll see the website there. It has a donation link, and I'd be pleased as punch if you can help in any amount. You've got the website address right there, and I will drop a link in the description to this video. If you don't see it, leave me a comment and I will get it there for sure. One more thing that I would like to ask you before I sign off on this feature is, despite my very long-windedness, if you learned anything, if you benefited from this, I'd ask, will you share this with your friends and family? Will you share it with other eagle communities so that we can all be more informed? If you do that, I'd really appreciate it, and I would consider that as payment. This video will end with tributes to the eaglets that have died. The first video is an artist named Tony Ray, who played flute at the 2024 ceremony. The second video is a memorial sculpture for an eaglet named Solo from 2017, and for the original adult male named Patriot. Please drop a comment. Let me know what you're thinking about all of this. And until we talk again, my friends, be safe and be well.